pecuniary and other interests in accordance with the Members' Code of Conduct, if it's not already printed on the sheet. Councillor Llewellyn.
It's still got that I'm a parish councillor. I have already said that I am no longer a parish councillor.
Okay, if we can, yes, we can delete that for future reference, please. Item number 5, the declarations of contact. I think probably like most members, I've been contacted on item 1 and item 4.
Yeah, I've also met and spoke with a few residents regarding item 4, but it didn't indicate which way I'm now inclined.
Thank you. Councillor Beaumont?
Item 3, Chairman. I've been talking about that for ages.
Councillor Shepherd?
Yeah, I've been contacted on item 1 for like the sales and item
7. Okay, thank you. Right, we move on to item number 6, that's applications on where the public have indicated a desire to speak. If I just run through that process for people that haven't been along before, the officer will present the report. Excuse me. Following on from that, we take the speakers as listed on our list of speakers. When you only get 3 minutes under the Constitution, once the egg timer goes off, I will stop you. That's so that it's fair to everybody that you get the same amount of time. However, members can ask a point of clarification. It can only be to clarify something that's been said during that 3 minutes. Following on from that, there may be, the officers may want to come back on anything. And then once something's been moved and seconded, the committee are able to debate the matter and hopefully reach a decision today. In the majority of cases we do, but in some cases, sometimes we defer items for either a site visit or further information, but generally we make a decision on the day. Right, so that will take us then on to item number 1, which is the land off the Longshoot.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the erection of 75 dwellings, including public open space, surface water drainage, landscaping, car parking and other associated works. The site is an area of land off the end of Greendale Road, which serves the Bellway development off the Longshoot, Nuneaton. This site was not included in the red line for the previous Bellway phases. As members may recall, this item was deferred from the Planning Applications Committee on the 12th of March to allow for further consultation with fire and rescue and for additional consultation with neighbours. To the north-eastern boundary is a hedgerow that separates this application site from the proposed Calendar Farm development of 850 dwellings that has been approved by committee subject to the completion of a legal agreement. To the western boundary is a hedgerow and a drainage ditch that separates the site from the rear gardens of properties in Gloucester Close and Calendar Close. To the south of the site are houses within Phase 1 and to the southeast is Phase 2. A very similar application has been previously considered by members on the 20th of November last year, where the application was refused. This application is now the subject of an appeal being considered at inquiry. On the 12th of March this year, Planning Applications Committee resolved to withdraw the reasons for refusal on that previous application, and this must now be considered as a material consideration in the determination of the application before you today. Objections received to the current scheme are detailed on the agenda and addendum and raise issues such as increased flooding, increased traffic, proximity to existing houses, impact on wildlife and impact on air pollution. The Council does not have a 5-year land supply of deliverable housing land to meet the identified housing need, on the basis that the Borough Plan has not yet been adopted. Some of the sites allocated within the borough plan are in the green belt, and this development would therefore contribute to the 5-year housing land supply. This is consequently a matter in itself which carries significant weight in favour of the application. The site itself is within the housing allocation of HSG1 as shown on the plan in front of you. So the blue area of land here is the application site with the access road running down here, and the red boundary is the HSG1 allocation set out in the emerging borough plan. If the emerging borough plan is adopted, this will have the effect of stating that development within that red line is acceptable. The 75 dwellings on this site were not added to the overall expected number of dwellings that could be built on the site. The site was suggested for development early on in the borough plan process through a call for sites, but at that time there was no agreement between the landowner and the potential developer for this site, and therefore was not considered as a deliverable site for the purposes of the borough plan hearings. It was, however, considered to be suitable for development and could offer flexibility if the landowner issues were resolved, hence its inclusion within HSG1. Over time, these issues have been resolved in that Bellways, the applicant, have submitted an application for development of this site, and this is a detailed permission indicating that it is deliverable. This again is a matter that weighs in favour of the application. When the current borough plan was being considered by the inspector in 2006, it was made clear by the inspector that the council needed to have a flexible plan to cater for medium and long-term housing need. This gave rise to 2 policies in the 2006 borough plan, designating land as ENV2, which is area of restraint, and ENV3, which is countryside protection. As time has passed and new guidance has been issued, the government allowed the council to save policies that were in conformity with the new national guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, and as such, these policies have been saved. However, further advice issued subsequent to that allowing us to save the policies from central government is that where the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, saved policies which deal with protecting land from development cannot be used to resist planning applications for housing development, and the applications must be assessed in accordance with the remainder of the saved policies and the advice contained within the NPPF. It is clear, therefore, that ENV2 and ENV3 cannot be used to refuse applications for housing development, as they are, in essence, controlling housing supply. As set out in the NPPF, there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and where there are no relevant development plan policies, or the policies which are most important for determining the application are out of date, the council is required to grant planning permission unless the NPPF gives a clear reason for refusing the application, or any adverse impacts of approving the application would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the National Planning Policy Framework taken as a whole. Sorry, too many skipped. The site is at the end of Greendale Road and uses this road as its access. So the red line here is Greendale Road, giving access to the application site. The red line includes Greendale Road because it's not yet an adopted road. It's a relatively long road with no bus routes running along it. However, there is a pedestrian connection close to this site through to the adjacent residential development on St Nicholas Park Drive estate, which is indicated here by this blue arrow. There's also a proposed link road from the development site into the development that is proposed at Calendar Farm. And the road through the development site to the Spine Road through Bellway's site is wide enough for a future bus route. This allows for connections between the existing and proposed developments, improving sustainability. Stagecoach, the bus company, are in support of the application for this reason. A contribution is also requested towards a cycle network from county highways, and the development site does include a cycle route which will again go through to the Calendar Farm development. In relation to the site layout and design, the proposed layout development equates to 28 dwellings per hectare. The previous phases provided approximately 21 dwellings per hectare. The proposed density of this application site complies with policy, and the NPPF states that councils should avoid approving low densities where there is a shortage of land, and development should make optimal use of the potential of each site. 25% of the 75 dwellings, 19 of them, are to be affordable. This is to be split between 4 one-bedroom properties, 11 two-bedroom dwellings, including 2 rentable bungalows, which is something that housing welcome due to the need for this type of dwelling, and 4 three-bedroom dwellings. Members raised some concerns in the previous application about the placement of these affordable houses, and to address this, the applicant has shown the affordable housing being split over 3 areas of the site. So there's a section to the north here, which provides for 3 shared ownership properties. There's a section here to the west, which provides for 7 affordable rental properties, and a section to the east, which provides for 2 shared ownership and 7 affordable rents. Housing have no objection to this housing split. The market homes for the rest of the site are split between 41 three-bedroomed homes and 15 two-bedroomed homes. They are largely 2-storey houses with 6 2.5-storey houses. Members did not raise any objection to the placement of dwellings with the last application, and the proposal fully complies with the residential design guide in relation to distance standards to existing properties. There are some very slight infringements in terms of distance standards within the site, but these are not significant enough to warrant a refusal. The design of the dwelling and materials are to fit with the existing Bellway scheme, detailing with with detailing to the eaves, brick arches to the heads of some of the windows, and detailing to windowsills. There are to be some monopitch porch roofs above front doors and flat roof dormers to the 2.5-storey houses. The finished floor levels of the houses at the northern end of the site have been reduced by approximately 700 millimetres, and although will still be slightly higher than the existing properties, this is not significant enough to make a difference in relation to distance standards. The dwellings have 2 parking spaces each, with some additional visitor spaces, except for the 1-bedroom properties that each have 1 space plus a visitor space between them. There are also some detached garages proposed, but due to the size of these, they are not considered by highways to be available for parking. Highways England and County Highways both have no objections to the proposal, subject to conditions and the completion of a legal agreement. One of the core planning principles outlined within the NPPF outlines the need for planning to promote walking, cycling and public transport to make the fullest possible use of the site. The scheme provides both road and cycle links to other proposed developments to the north and east of the site. As I've already said, Stagecoach, the bus company, have commented that the road is wide enough to allow a bus link through to Calendar Farm. County Highways have requested Section 106 legal obligations towards the provision of cycle infrastructure to connect the site to the town centre. As members will recall, the application was deferred from the Planning Committee on the 12th of March to allow for further consultation with Fire and Rescue. For fire safety reasons, they only allow up to 400 dwellings to be constructed off a single point of access. It does say 200 in your agenda, but that has been clarified on the addendum. It is 400, not 200. So the 400 are allowed of a single access point without either an alternative access or method of fire protection being in place. Phase 1 and 2 of the Bellway's development totals 376 dwellings. Therefore, Fire and Rescue have confirmed that they will allow a further 23 dwellings to be constructed, taking the total to 399 off this single point of access. Beyond this, there either needs to be an alternative access to the site, or, if this is not possible, due to the timings of the development outside of the application site that Bellways will rely on to gain that alternative access, then each of the dwellings over and above 399 can be fitted with a sprinkler system. As on the plan here, there are 2 other points of access from the link road serving the site out to other developments that also have their own access points. One will be constructed through the Gelson's site, which is out onto Greendale Road, through the Bellway site, so this is this one here. And the other will exist to Calendar Farm, which is to the north of the application site here, once built out. Condition 16 on your agenda covers this. In relation to flooding, the site is located in flood zone 1, which is considered suitable for all land uses. A flood risk assessment has been provided in line with guidance, and it is proposed that rainwater will be dealt with via a sustainable urban drainage system. There are a number of concerns from local residents that the proposal would exacerbate flooding problems to the existing houses. These objections, with the local knowledge of the ground conditions, were forwarded to County Flood Risk Team for their information and comment. The County Flood Risk Team have responded that they have no objections to the site being developed subject to the conditions as set out on your agenda. The field at present to be developed drains to a drainage ditch running along the boundary with the properties in Gloucester Close. The proposal is that the site, post-development, will drain to the sustainable urban drainage, which is in this location here. Originally, tree planting was proposed along the boundary with Calendar and Gloucester Close. However, due to the impact on the ditch from the trees, such as potentially destabilising the bank, the trees have been removed and these are now to be planted in open space on the site. The development is not of sufficient size to provide formal open space on site. Some incidental open space is provided, which the council will not be adopting, but this is to be looked after by a management company and is to be covered in a legal agreement. The neighbours had concerns that the easement area in front of the hedge and ditch could provide a corridor for gaining access to the rear of the existing properties on Calendar and Gloucester Close. The fact that the site is currently open and unfenced must be taken into account, and there is no evidence to suggest that anything could change. Some of the proposed properties actually face onto the hedge and ditch, and this would provide natural surveillance where it currently isn't any. In terms of ecology, the proposal retains the hedgerows and the northern boundary hedges to be gapped with new hedgerow species where necessary. An ecological report has been submitted which confirms that there are no protected species other than potentially bats foraging on the site, which Warwickshire Wildlife Trust agrees with. Neighbours have confirmed that bats are present in the area, but it has been raised that the bat survey submitted with the application is out of date. The submitted survey and the site have been assessed by our Parks and Amenities team. The hedgerows that run adjacent to the boundaries of the site and the trees within them are to be retained, which provide for foraging for bats. Parks consider that no further work is necessary on this issue. The hedgerow habitat can be protected, but with a condition that lighting must not be allowed to affect this area. A biodiversity impact assessment has been carried out, and the calculation concluded that there would be a loss in biodiversity from the development of this site. In order to mitigate the loss, the developer and our parks team have agreed that meadow creation at Tiverton Drive Recreation Area, whilst leaving enough mown grass for play, will mitigate the impact of the development. The developer is to pay for this through a Section 106 legal obligation that will be dealt with later on in my presentation. The incidental open space provided on the site is enhanced by a number of wildflower and wetland flower mixes and woodland planting. Noise is covered on the agenda, and I don't propose to add further to this. Policy HS2 of the Emerging Borough Plan at Part C refers to the need to consider the potential impacts to air quality management areas, and the NPPF National Planning Policy Framework also refers to the need for decisions to take into account air quality management areas. The nearest air quality management area is relatively close by at the Leicester Road Gyratory and has to be crossed in order to drive into the town centre from this site. The development will lead to an increase in traffic, which may impact upon air quality. The Council's Environmental Protection team have scrutinised the air quality report that was submitted with the application and an amended report that has subsequently been submitted. Looking at both of these, they do not object to the application and consider that mitigation can be achieved by condition requiring the provision of electric vehicle charging points, which is a condition on your agenda. Environmental Protection confirm that whilst the air quality report does not extend to include roads outside the air quality management area, it does model further along Hinkley Road going towards the development. The report shows that there is almost no measurable increase in concentrations at even the nearest modelled receptor positions on Hinkley Road, and hence the impact is classed as negligible. It is reasonable then to expect that the impact will be even less the more remote from the development that you are. The site is located about 1.5 kilometres from the air quality management area, and Environmental Protection do not expect it to cause any measurable impact on the air quality management area due to the distance from the site. Environmental Protection do not object to the application, subject to conditions as set out on your agenda. Now, as set out on your agenda, planning obligations should also be considered to make otherwise unacceptable development acceptable. The developer has agreed to pay all of the financial obligations that are being requested. These are just over £43,000 to George Eliot Hospital Trust for A&E attendances, almost £248,000 for cycling infrastructure to improve connections of the site to the town centre, almost £420,000 towards education, split between primary and secondary schools, just over £1,000 towards library improvements, just over £2,000 to rights of way and public footpath improvements, £91,000 towards improvements to sports and leisure facilities, and just over £118,000 towards play and open space facilities in the area. The latest one to be included in this list is almost £34,000 for biodiversity offsetting, which is set out on your addendum. In addition, the developer has agreed to secure 25% of the plots to be used for affordable housing via a legal agreement. The recommendation is therefore approval, subject to the completion of the legal agreement and conditions as set out on the agenda and addendum. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Claire. Just before I start calling the speakers, can I just say it's pretty busy public gallery tonight, so if you're happy to speak from wherever you are, that's fine, or alternatively come down to where there's a chair allocated for the speaker. But it's probably a bit difficult getting in and out. Okay, our first speaker is Councillor Trowbridge. Sorry?
Just talking to
You can do it through the chair, so I know what's going on.
Thank you, Chair. Myself, as Councillor for St Nicholas Ward and Councillor Walmsley for Wellington Ward are very disappointed, along with a number of our residents, that this application has come to the committee, given that a very, very similar, if not virtually identical application has come to this committee in November and was rejected, and rejected for good reasons. The applicant appealed, and that appeal was subsequently recovered to the Secretary of State by the MP because of the flaws that we pointed out at the time of the last planning application hearing. Just to recap, we can see there, as the officers drawn our attention to the map for HSG1, there's lots of these maps in the borough plan for the various housing areas, HSG1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. These are the areas within which you can do development, and there is an absolute total number of houses in the borough plan that can be achieved by building in various parts of these various outlined areas. The outlined areas do not mean that all planning applications have to be accepted in all of those areas, and that every single square foot of those areas has to be built on. And indeed this application was not, as we've heard from the officer, although it's in the red outline area of HSG1, the numbers were not included in the borough plan, nor are they needed to achieve the borough plan target. A borough plan target which both parties have said is due for review and revision downwards. So there are very good reasons why this was rejected before and should be rejected again. The numbers are not needed for the borough plan, even though the area itself is technically in one of the outline areas, the numbers are not needed, and for that reason we should not be approving this application. We've heard from the officer that there were some other good reasons, although not good enough by themselves to reject this application. There was a whole bunch of safe policies, there's a whole bunch of issues about layout and all the rest of it, which by themselves aren't enough to reject an application, but taken together indicate that this is an unsustainable development. And taken on top of the fact that we pointed out when a very, very similar application to this came before us in November, that the flooding on the ground, the flood relief on the ground, isn't working the way it was described, and that residents are unhappy there. We are seeing that water is flowing out, and to be clear, nobody is saying that that land is ever going to flood to 6 or 10 feet deep, or people will be flooded out of their homes. What we are saying is that the ground is remaining saturated for far longer than it should, that people's driveways are breaking up before they should, that hard landscaping in gardens isn't working the way it should, that people can't use their gardens for many months of the year. Now that's not fair in a new home, it makes it unsustainable.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Are there any points of clarification? No, thank you. Melanie Allen.
Firstly, I'd like to thank those on the planning committee who refused the original application. For those who approved it, many of us believe nothing we say makes any difference. Not the fact it's been highlighted, government guidelines for legally protected species have been ignored regarding a bat survey for this site. It's been considered one completed for the original application in 2012 as applicable. Originally, this land was marked as a 4.6 hectare community park. So either, as stated by the planning officer, this is a new application dealt with in isolation, therefore a new survey is required, or this land must be formed into the community park as per the original plans. Not the fact that there'll be a loss of biodiversity. NPPF guideline 170 states there must be net gains in biodiversity. This site will lose a naturally formed area of wetland, as shown in the planning officer's biodiversity slide. In mitigation, the answer is being put forward to spend nearly £34,000 improving grassland on a different estate. So the neighbours of this site suffer all the losses and none of the benefits. When redesigning the site and building just a few less properties could save that naturally formed wetland. Not the fact an issue has been raised concerning emergency vehicle access. I find it astounding a recommendation has been put forward for sprinkler systems to be fitted in 51 out of the 75 properties to resolve this. Who will maintain those systems? If I was a member of the planning committee, this wouldn't sit easy on my conscience. Not the fact that the SUDs, the sustainable urban drainage, are to be situated at the top of an incline on the site. When did water run uphill? Gardens to Calendar and Gosser Close already waterlogged, and this will only get worse. Look at the history of the gardens on Paddock Drive, which back onto the site. They are now protected by underground water tanks. Statutory consultees have not objected, but they haven't been supplied with the correct information. Existing properties will lose privacy, and the planning officer advised it's acceptable for windows in new properties to overlook existing gardens, but the same windows can't be moved to overlook gardens which don't yet exist. Children are commuting outside of the borough to be schooled, but despite thousands of houses granted permission, there's still not one extra class for underage for any age child. This site is not allocated for development of the borough plan, now approved by the planning inspector. Within the inspector's report, it stated this one location already accounts for nearly a third of the housing requirement. Additional development outside of the borough plan and this location would result in a disjointed and unsustainable pattern of development. It's also noted, original public consultation diagram, phase 3 is where Bellways said they would put a woodland.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification? No? Mrs. Michelle Conley.
Thank you. I request that the committee refuse this application on the grounds of prematurity. In the inspector's report on the borough plan, he made it clear that HSG1 should not be expanded above 4,419 homes. The number of homes on identified developments in HSG1 are already above this number. The inspector said that this was as many as the market would bear, so approving this site would simply displace sales from other sites, which include trigger points for vital infrastructure. On the loss of biodiversity, the documents initially presented were wrong. Bellway have conceded that the residents were correct and the land has rewilded after several years of not being farmed. A new report has now been submitted. This clearly shows that the site has an area that floods and is wetland. This shows that we need a larger attenuation feature which will also capture any overflow from the ditch to the west. It is not reassuring to read in the report that the county flood risk team have reiterated that the application is subject to condition for further details to be provided at the detailed design stage to ensure the scheme does not increase flood risk in line with the national policy, i.e. the existing plans do not definitively show that existing homes would not be at greater risk. Still on biodiversity, the NPPF paragraph 170 states that the planning system should contribute to and enhance the natural and local environment by minimising impacts on biodiversity and providing net gains in biodiversity. It does not say if possible, as it does in the officer's report. Mitigation somewhere in the borough does not help the existing residents. We are used to seeing farmland, scrubland, with the wildlife it contains. Having mitigation elsewhere does not help us. We need to be seeing the birds, the butterflies, etc. as we do now. This is necessary for everyone's mental health. There is an easy way to get biodiversity gains on this site. Build fewer houses and have more open space. The air pollution report excludes the impacts in the AQMA, which is stated in the officer's report, all traffic from the development passes through to get to the Neaton town centre. If you've got more homes, you've got more traffic, slower traffic, longer queues, more pollution. With the fire and rescue, this application would create a massive cul-de-sac of 450 homes. A previous application on the Persimmon site put a limit of 250 homes before the second exit was required. This site seems to be having a fudge of sprinklers, but as sprinklers are not instead of the fire brigade attending, it is still a huge issue. It means that one house might have a sprinkler system, but the neighbour not, and the fire brigade still have to get through the same problem. The report says, as this site is less than 200 homes, adoptable open space does not have to be provided within the phase, which allows for the scheme to be denser. The site should be considered as a whole, phase 1, 2 and now 3. It should have been developed as one entity with the necessary infrastructure requirements. Once again, the developer is using the system to the detriment of the residents.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Chris O'Hanlon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The application before you is for 75 new homes and represents the third phase of residential development by Bellway Homes at land off the Long Shoot. Members have previously approved the first and second phases of development. Phase 1 is now completely sold out, and construction is underway on Phase 2 with sales of around 30 properties per year being achieved. The principle of residential development on this site has been supported by the Council through the emerging local plan process, resulting in the site being allocated for residential development. The Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, and therefore the presumption in favour of sustainable development clearly applies to this application, and thus the principle of development for the site is considered acceptable. Since the application was deferred by this planning committee in March this year, Bellway have undertaken to resolve the issues raised by Warwickshire Fire Service, and we've been able to agree an acceptable solution that can be secured by the planning conditions set out in your officer's report. In addition, we've worked closely with your open space officer concerning the level of biodiversity enhancement that the site will deliver, and agreed an acceptable solution involving the financial contribution being made to improving existing open space at Tiverton Drive. The application site will include 25% affordable housing and is therefore policy compliant. In total, 19 of the dwellings will be affordable, and this weighs significantly in favour of the proposals. The Borough Council does not have a 5-year deliverable housing land supply, and this application delivers social, environmental and economic benefits, which are positive aspects within the planning balance. The County Council's flood team have reviewed the proposals and confirmed that they have no objection from a flooding and drainage perspective, subject to conditions. Bellway Homes have agreed to the Section 106 contributions requested as detailed in your report, and these total around £960,000. These include improvements at George Eliot Hospital, provision of cycle infrastructure from the site to the town centre, additional primary and secondary school places, enhancements to local playing pitches and other public open spaces, and their ongoing maintenance costs, as well as the provision of 25% affordable housing on site. Finally, as set out in your officer's report, Bellway have accepted a reduced time limit for the expiration of any planning permission that is granted by this planning committee, reflecting our commitment to deliver these new homes quickly in order to meet the demand that currently exists. I would therefore encourage members to consider the proposals positively and take account of their commitment to the draft allocation within the emerging borough plan that identifies this site for housing development and the social, economic and environmental benefits that the scheme will deliver. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any points or clarification? No, okay, thank you. Anything the officers want to come back on? Any of the points that have been raised?
Not at the moment, thank you.
No? Okay.
So
Then.
we'll have to make
Well, okay then. To enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation as printed, which is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed? Is that seconded?
I'll second that, Chair.
Remember? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I think many of us sat around the table and have a sense of deja vu. This site still greatly concerns me. When you look at the map of HSG1, which was shown before, the closeness to the A5 of all the developments we are currently seeing as part of HSG1 is truly frightening. And we are losing great big swathes of green lungs throughout the borough, particularly in this neck of the woods in the borough. The speakers have mentioned about all the positive effects of having open spaces, and indeed this council has probably numerous policies about saying about the good effects of having open spaces, yet here we seem to be determined that almost every single square inch of HSG1 is going to be built upon, and I still can't support that. We're told that open space in this particular plot will not be adopted by the council. The open spaces will not be adopted by the council. So the residents will not only have to pay the same amount of council tax as every other person in the borough, they will then have to pay a surcharge for a management fee to mow the lawn, which will be mowed for free, or should I say as part of people's council tax, just a street down the road. This council should be taking on that land and being fair to all the residents. If we are going to build it, we should then service it as a council. And we are not proposing to do that. The report on page 19 is quite interesting, and the officers have reiterated this. It says, and I quote, "To clarify, the 75 dwellings was not accounted for as part of the overall HSG1 allocation of 4,419 dwellings." The inspector's report makes for very interesting reading. It says, let me just find my notes on it, because it is germane to this chair. It says, paragraphs 40 and 41 of the report, HSG1 sees an increase in housing numbers from 3,331 to 4,419. Any more would be unsustainable, and the numbers are already dependent on maximum delivery rates. It also goes on to say that, where is it, about any more development in this particular area would risk coalescence with Hinckley. Yet what we are being asked to approve tonight flies, to me, in the face of the black and white printed report of the inspector received not even 2 weeks ago. So, on that basis, Chair, I am not going to support it. If the officers and this council believe that that triangle of land should be developed, but they can't square that circle against the written report of the inspector from 2 weeks ago, let them take it to appeal and let our officers argue it out with them and let the inspector decide. We have one inspector's report which to me I seem to have to unwillingly have to support in other areas, but in this respect it seems to me to provide a little defence and a little bit of comfort to the residents who are being greatly affected in St Nicholas and Weddington. And I think we should pay great heed to those words, because he's approved everything else. He's a great poker player, that inspector. No one sat around this table who actually sat opposite him in the hearings would have liked to put a bet on which way he would go. But it's crystal clear in that report for me, Chair. I will not support the recommendation. 4,419 is what he said, no more.
I'm just interested about this thing about the inspector, the local plan inspector against the planning inspector.
Yeah, the local plan inspector has given us a report on the examination of the local plan. That isn't a policy of this council and couldn't be used as a reason for refusal.
Yeah,
His words, it would be a material consideration both in your discussions now and in any inspectors and planning inspectorate appeal. The inspector's report won't become a policy of this council until it's adopted. Both planning legislation, regulations and this council's constitution says that can only be done by full council.
If I may,
Was there anybody else indicate to speak? No? Give our speaker then.
if I may, Chair, we can't, as a council, have our cake and eat it. I accept it is not an adopted policy, but the NPPF says that the closer we are to adoption, the greater weight we have to put on the report. Now, I don't know what discussions other members have had with senior officers. My discussions with senior officers have led me to believe we are probably 6 to 8 weeks away from having this adopted. I believe it's going to overview and scrutiny on the 9th, with a view to it going to Cabinet on the 22nd, and I've encouraged or given representations to the executive directors to call an extraordinary council as soon as possible thereafter. I think the original plan was 17th of July, you said, didn't you, Gavin? So we are, whilst we technically can't get away with refusing it on grounds of prematurity, I believe there is sufficient wiggle room among paragraph 48 of the National Planning Policy Framework to put greater weight on the inspector's report, and then let's see what happens with the adoption of the borough plan. By the time it gets to be considered, one would assume the borough plan would be adopted, and those paragraphs I referred to would have even greater weight, I would believe, if it was to go to inspection and we'd approved it by that point. I don't think the residents have seen a lot of money from this council go into supporting something which they fundamentally disagree with. Let's spend, if we have to, a little bit of money defending our residents' interests for a change.
Okay, thank you. The recommendation was moved and seconded, and that is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed. All those in favour of that? And against? Seven. And abstentions? Okay, so that's not approved. Carried away, it's not been refused. It's not been approved. I don't know how many times this year I've had to do it, I'll go through it again. When we've got a recommendation in front of us and it's not been approved, that means there's nothing on the table. Somebody needs to move something else. Or not, and then it's just not here. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I was just trying to think of a form of words to try and put into effect what I was thinking before I move something, but I'm sure Catherine will assist me with some of the technicalities. I move refusal on the basis that the numbers are outside of the emerging borough plan for the site HSG 1 in accordance with paragraph 48 of the MPPF, which this committee believes that significant weight should be placed on the emerging borough plan and the inspector's report.
I'd like to second that, Chair.
Okay, so is everybody clear on what has been moved and seconded? Yes?
Can we be clear, Chair, on what policy HSG1 actually says in terms of housing numbers before we...
Well, policy HSG1 at the moment says the 3,000, whatever it is. The main modification that the inspector has suggested changes that to up to 4,419.
So sorry, for me it's probably me. So is this above that, below it, on the line with it?
Well,
How do we know?
sorry, the inspector says at least 4,419, not up to, that's my mistake, sorry. It said up to before, he suggested it says at least. So, the difficulty would be defending the at least for 75 units, when we still haven't actually given planning approval for all the other sites.
So, can I be clear so that everybody's clear on the committee? The question is, can the officers, the planning officers, defend that reason for refusal if it was a appeal?
It would be difficult because at the moment the inspector in his report is suggesting that it requires a main modification which says at least, and that plan hasn't yet been adopted, and once adopted it can only be adopted with all those main modifications. So we can't pick and choose the main modifications. So if adopted, the adopted plan is likely to say up to 4,490.
Yes, Chair. Two points. I think the first, I need to come back to what Councillor Wilson said in terms of the inspector's letter, and I'll come back to that because I think he may have misconstrued what the inspector was saying. In paragraph 109 of the inspector's letter, which is in connection with HSG1, the inspector says, to make the plan effective and recognise its full potential during the planned period, I recommend main modification 20 and 32, which would clarify that the revised capacity of this strategic location over the planned period would be a minimum of 4,419. So there's no cap. In terms of what the inspector did say about the north of Nuneaton, he wasn't, I think, talking specifically about HSG1. He was actually talking about the number of dwellings that have been allocated up to the boundaries of HSG1, and he is effectively saying that he doesn't think that we should go outside of the boundaries of the existing HSG1 allocation. In other words, he's talking about adding on to those existing. He thinks that's at capacity. Now the issue for us is this application is actually within the HSG1 allocation. So it's not about numbers, it's about the boundary. So I'm just going to find the paragraph just to
Paragraphs
clarify
40 and 41 are what I looked at.
that. 40 and 41, that's what I've just been looking at. So Chair, if I just read this out to you. So on paragraph 40, the inspector says, on submission, the plan allocated 3,331 homes, which is what was in the original plan, on land north of Nuneaton. So not HSG1, just land north of Nuneaton. Through subsequent consent to 1st April 2018, this number has increased to 4,419. Broadly, this one location already accounts for nearly a third of the housing requirement. The land identified in the plan is well related to existing housing and forms the next logical extension to the town at this location, as evidenced through the SHLA and the SA, so the Strategic Housing Land Assessment and also the Sustainability Appraisal. Accordingly, additional peripheral areas of land would be further removed from existing jobs and services in Nuneaton and planned facilities yet to be built north of Nuneaton, including the link road and additional schools. Additional peripheral development at this location would result in a disjointed and unsustainable pattern of development. In other words, going beyond the allocation would be peripheral. So I think in that context, it's a misinterpretation of what the inspector's saying, because his main modification is saying within HSG1, he doesn't know how many properties are actually going to be provided. He's just taking it on as the basis of what's already been approved as a minimum, and in fact he recognises that densities will change over time depending on market forces, and it could be more. So I don't think that we can legitimately refuse it on that basis.
He does say that it is at the maximum of market deliverability, even the 4,419.
Well, what he says in his main modifications is he expects there could be more within the policy.
But this lot of land wasn't within within the inspection.
It's within the policy area, and it is. The 4,419 is just a figure.
Not the residence, Chair.
No, for the purpose of the policy, we don't know how many properties will actually be delivered within HSG1 until it's completed and fully completed.
Okay, right. Where was now? We've got to the point. Yeah, the question was, is whether the planning officer's professional advice is whether what's been moved and seconded can be supported at appeal if it was to be passed by this committee. So the answer is no to that. Now I can't make members alter what's been put forward, but I do have to say to members of this committee, you do need to take account of the possible consequences of supporting such a thing as this, and if it goes to appeal, and any costs effect on that. That doesn't mean that, it's one of those things, you do have to take serious account of it in determining an application. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the application be refused as the numbers involved are outside of the plan. All those in favour of that? And against? 2, 3, sorry.
Abstention?
Yeah, and no. And abstention.
2.
That's refused. The application